Good evening and a warm welcome to the University of Essex and the Lakeside Theatre. I am Jonathan White, Director of Library and Cultural Services and University Librarian here at the University, and I am honoured this evening to be introducing our event and welcoming back to the University Professors Ades and Valerie Fraser, the founders of the Essex collection of art from Latin America, ESCALA. Tonight, Professors Ades and Fraser have kindly joined us this evening to discuss with us how they founded this internationally important collection back in 1993 in conversation with our collection curator, Dr Sarah Demelo. As you may be aware, we are currently celebrating the first 30 years of the ESCALA collection, which is established as the largest publicly accessible collection of Latin American art in the UK. It's fair to say that ESCALA is the jewel in the crown of our university collections, and we are enormously proud of the contributions it makes to teaching, learning, and research, and the positive impact it makes on our students, our researchers, and the visiting researchers we welcome from all over the world to study the collection. The collection is situated within a museum-certified facility here on campus, and this enables exploration and study of the collection in a professional standard environment. In addition, we also have permanent exhibitions from the collection around the campus, including in the Silberad Student Centre in the building next door. Currently, we have an exhibition celebrating the 30 years of the collection, and this can be found in Art Exchange and in the Albert Sloman Library here on campus. And I really encourage everyone to go and look at that exhibition that we have at the moment, including our latest commission, which is the new artwork Axis Mundi by artist Rebecca Romero. As the event introducer, it is incumbent upon me to cover a few housekeeping essentials, so please bear with me while we do this. Can we ask that all mobile phones are turned to silent or turned off during tonight's event? And I would also like to make you aware that we are video recording this event, and it will be made accessible and available on the university's ESCALA Vimeo account. During the question and answer session, if you wish to pose a question, please raise your hand and one of our ushers will approach you with the microphone. Thank you again for joining us tonight to celebrate 30 years of ESCALA, the first 30 years of ESCALA, and we do indeed hope and wish for many, many more. I would like to invite you to join us for a small reception after the talk in the bar above us. I shall now hand over to Dr Sarah Demelo, who will introduce our guest speakers and moderate this evening's talk.
Right, thank you very much for joining us this evening. This is a real pleasure for me as sort of a ESCALA curator to sort of host this event and to sort of have sort of moderate a conversation between Don, Val, and myself. And what I'll do, I'd like to sort of introduce them formally, although I think for many people in the room, they won't need much of an introduction. Professor Don Ades, CBE, is a Professor Emerita at the University of Essex, Fellow of the British Academy, a former trustee of Tate, Professor of Art History at the Royal Academy, and was appointed a Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 2013 for her services to higher education and art history. She pioneered the study of Latin American art in the UK. In 1971, she developed courses on art from the region, teaching pre-Columbian, colonial, and modern art to students here at Essex as part of art history courses offered within the School of Comparative Studies. Alongside Professor Valerie Fraser, she founded the Essex Collection of Art from Latin America, ESCALA, in 1993. Her research has also focused on data and surrealism, publishing books on photo montage, photography, and women artists. Her publications include Data and Surrealism, Writings on Art and Anti-Art, Marcel Duchamp, Photo Montage, and Surrealism in Latin America. She has curated and co-curated many exhibitions in the UK and internationally over the past 40 years, including Dada Surrealism from 1978, the seminal art in Latin America, the modern era, 1820 to 1980 from 1989, which will come up later. The Salvador Dali centenary at the Palazzo Grassi in Venice in 2004. Undercover Surrealism, Georges Bataille and Document at the Hayward Gallery in 2006. The Color of My Dreams, The Surrealist Revolution in Art at the Vancouver Art Gallery, and Dali Duchamp at the Royal Academy from 2017. She was associate, as well, on top of all that, she was associate curator for Manifesta 9 in 2012. And Professor Valerie Fraser is as well a professor emerita here at the University of Essex. She is a specialist in art and architecture of Latin America and Spain, with a particular emphasis on the early colonial period and the 20th and 21st centuries. Alongside Professor Ades, she also co-founded the Essex Collection of Art from Latin America in 1993. She's been seminal to the success of ESCALA as well through numerous major funding awards from the Arts and Humanities Research Council, including for a fully illustrated online catalog for the collection, which launched in 2005, a 3-year research project from 2009 to 2012 entitled Meeting Margins, Transnational Art in Latin America and Europe from 1950 to 1978, which was a collaboration with the University of Arts in London and investigated the artistic relations between Europe and Latin America in the post-world period. She has worked on several exhibitions, including Kahlo's Contemporaries, which sort of flashes up at one point, held at the University Gallery, now Art Exchange. Oh, there we go, the catalog. In 2005, Latin American art context and accomplices at the Sainsbury Centre at University of East Anglia in 2004, and her seminal books, Building the New World, The Architecture of Conquest, and Drawing the Line, written with Oriana Badley in sort of 1989. And both Professor Ades and Professor Fraser have made significant financial donations to the university to ensure ESCALA's legacy, further promoting object-based learning and worked activity with material from their collections. They have both supported studies from the region, encouraged, supervised, and promoted the work of many other students and scholars researching art from Latin America. They are true champions and trailblazers in the study of art from Latin America and the UK. Their legacy permeates every single artwork, object, and document that forms part of the ESCALA collection. And tonight we honor their work and contributions to the field of art from Latin America. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
And we'll sort of take a slightly informal approach to this evening. But one of the places I'd like to start is really going back to the early years at Essex. So, Dawn, you arrived in 1968 as a lecturer. Val, you arrived in 1968 as a student. Mm-hmm. And, as the university now is 60th anniversary, we've done a lot of sort of research on the really important role that visual arts played from the very beginning, with founding sort of Vice Chancellor Sir Albert Sloman's Wreath Lectures, a university art collection, a university in the making, to the 1963 donation by artworks from Jim Ede, who later went on to found Kettle's Yard. And in particular, there's a bit of correspondence sort of from Sir Sloman to Jim Ede from July 1965, where he writes, "As you know, the university is hoping that I can do something about the visual perception of all students. It is also hoping to establish a department of art. For both reasons, therefore, we should like to build up a collection of pictures," sort of end quote. So, and that's going back, that's 1965. That's just a year after the university is open. So in the years after that, sort of as a lecturer and as a student, what was the study of art like here at the time?
Just first of all, I'd really like to thank you, Sarah and Giselle, for the amazing work you've done, putting the exhibition together, all that research into the archive. I mean, we had forgotten many of the things that, that went on at the beginning. It was actually fantastic to see the documents upstairs. So that was great. Yes, I mean, history of art at the time, that's in the 60s, was still trying to decide what it was. I mean, there were two major strands at the time. There was the Courtauld Institute, which was really founded on connoisseurial lines. You know, you were meant to be able to recognise the work of an artist if you had a career in a museum. And then there was the Warburg, which had been founded by the wonderful German art historians in the 30s who had fled Nazism, and they set up the Institute again, where the history of art was sort of treated more as part of the history of ideas, and it was much more philosophical and demanded a much greater degree of general sort of knowledge, languages and so on. So there were these two strands, and I think what we did here was a sort of mixture of both, because we had Courtauld-trained art historians, but also Michael Podrow, who came from the Warburg, and was very strongly committed to the more theoretical side of things. But the curious thing was that this was just in the 70s and 80s, a time when theory was beginning to come in a big way in the history of art. And we'd sort of pioneered that, but we'd actually not given up on the study of the works of art. And that's...
If I can add to that, I think when, as a student, but certainly when I became a member of staff, what was essential to all the art history courses in the department was that the idea that you had to look at a work of art in the flesh, as it were, in the paint. You had to go and see the real thing. And we had endless gallery visits to London and obviously an annual trip to Florence and so on. But when it came to Latin American art, then there wasn't anything to look at. That was part of the driving force, if you like, for, I think, behind the Weckley Scala history for us.
So in the early courses that you taught and that you attended, there was that sort of real impetus of sort of, I think, what we call maybe object-based learning now. Sort of really that first-hand looking, sort of really sort of observing the artwork, the slow looking at the details of it.
Yes.
So whether it's trips
Very
to
much
London.
so. Always, every Friday gallery visit in London.
There still is.
So good. and ideally, and I still do it whenever possible, you know, you're in an exhibition or wherever, and you're exchanging ideas and ways of seeing things, because it's quite extraordinary how differently people perceive art and works of art. So I think that kind of dialogue in front of the object is terribly important. But of course, as Val said, we were, you know, there was very little in the way of art from Latin America in the late 60s and early 70s. And the thing was, just very quickly, so I came as a part-time lecturer in 68. The School of Comparative Studies, as it was then called, was founded with two departments, government and literature, and then sociology very quickly joined, and then the fourth one was art. Rather surprisingly, I mean, what was it doing there? But Sloman had been very keen on that, and the point about the collection very early on actually justifies what we did later. But there was a tremendous tension, between departments. So there were 4 departments, but then the ideology or the ethos of the school was that it should be comparative studies to begin with, and in the first year, the common first year, all students did for all those 4 subjects, plus Enlightenment. Now, among the art historians, they didn't quite understand what was going on there. And so there was terrific tension between the discipline-based departments and the school as a whole. And I just want to read you very quickly, if I can find it, a comment from the Dean of the School of Comparative Studies I think it's about 1969, George Decker. Some of you may remember George Decker. And he says, in its present form, the art department syllabus makes scarcely a pretense to conform with basic school curriculum policies. This is partly due to staffing difficulties, but it is arguable that the nature of the discipline is such that courses in the art of Russia, Latin America, and North America could never be much more than a fringe benefit. Wow. So that's where we started. And indeed, what happened was that each department was actually required to offer some sort of course in either Latin American or Russian, or both, ideally. So the department was completely baffled, and one of our meetings very early on said, well, is anyone prepared to teach anything Latin America? And I said, well, I speak Spanish and I've been to Mexico. I'll have a go. And I really no idea what this entailed. So that's where it began. Oh, so then, of course, I discovered there was almost nothing in the way of literature on the subject, not to speak of actually works of art to see. And so I had a very generous grant from the university to do field work in 1972, and I travelled around taking slides, which is the basis of the teaching subsequently, of my bit of it.
How did you, Val, how did you become interested in it? Really sort of, we were chatting upstairs about...
Yes,
we were chatting upstairs about sort of why you came to Essex and what drew you here as a student and then into sort of studying art from Latin America.
Well, there was an Observer colour supplement in 1966 or something which influenced me very strongly. And I thought, that sounds like an interesting place to go. And for me also, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I hadn't got a clue. I'd never heard of art history. And I liked the idea, which was central to Sloman's ethos of the foundation of the university, that people will find stuff they'd never encountered before if you have a general first year. So the general first year was very attractive to me. But on top of that, they were also offering a language year. And I thought, yes, I have a sort of spattering of Spanish somewhere, I'll do Spanish. So I did first year Spanish there was a little team of us, and the university said you can go to Spain for the summer term. We said, no, we're not going to Franco, Spain, we're going to go to Mexico because this is about Latin America. This is October, this is the summer of '69, and there'd been protests all over Essex and protests all over Mexico. But back in the day, you flew to the States and you took the Greyhound bus and it took hours and hours and ages and days, got to the border, was not allowed. We were not allowed in. We had our passports stamped persona non grata, and it was never really clear whether it was the responsibility of the British government thinking we would get involved and maybe killed in protests in Mexico, or whether it was the Mexicans thinking we'd come from a protesting university and we were going to stir things up in Mexico. Either way, we had to come back, and we did end up going to Franco's Spain after all. So. But it committed me to the idea of Latin America. That was, if you like, the sort of final, yes, this is important.
And it's just sort of say, as a brief aside, Val has very graciously donated her copy of the 1966 Which University Guide from the Observer. And I would just like to say as well that under the sort of description for Essex, hardly any rules is underlined twice. What I think is absolutely brilliant. I think absolutely brilliant.
I'm quite proud of that.
Yeah, we're keeping that. Yeah. So then, Val, you then joined the department in 1979. Yeah, as a lecturer. So how, with the two of you now working together, sort of within the department, how did you then sort of see steering sort of the teaching and the research of art from Latin America? not knowing, what's going to happen sort of in 93 with the founding of the collection, but, you know, that's sort of the pre-founding, shall we say.
I'll say a little bit, and then you can say a little bit. I think we decided we would sort of divide it, that Dawn did the Mexican end of things and I did the Peruvian and the South American side of things, because I was doing a PhD on Peruvian colonial architecture, I suppose, and I'd done a lot of travelling. But we organised the courses jointly, didn't we? And we, I think at some point we divided it into a pre-Columbian course and a modern and contemporary.
Yes. I remember the first year I was teaching and I tried to do everything in 1 year, you know, starting the earliest pre-Columbian and going up to almost the present day. And it turned out not really to be possible. I think you were there for that.
I think I probably took that course, yes.
And eventually it ended up with a second year course, basically pre-Columbian, but including Peru and Mexico and everywhere else, which Tim Lawton, who subsequently started teaching it as well for us. And then the second year was colonial to modern, really, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yes. And that one thing we found when we were going through some old papers yesterday, I can't resist this, sorry, and I found I had Val's copy of a conversation that she'd had, questions and answers, and the title of this event was Hegel, and an attempt at understanding the aesthetic value of Inca architecture. Now, there you have Warburg and the things we were trying to study coming into direct conflict. It was really quite funny. I'm sorry.
Yes.
So the department did sort of try to make an effort, but basically left us to do what we had to do, because really it was a quite new sort of area to be looking at the art in Latin America. And I think we probably did call it Latin American art. When I came to work on the exhibition that I organised at the Hayward Gallery in 1989, I was very determined not to call it Latin American art, but to call it art in Latin America, in order not to lock it too tightly into national identities, or even as it were international identities, because that wasn't the point. But one was looking at something where people tended to see it at the time, certainly the art of that period, from the modern, what I call the modern era, from 1820 to 1910, as a kind of pale reflection of European art, and that was the thing we really did not want to follow. That wasn't a line that we wanted to pick up.
Can I add to that too, that a crucial figure in this was Gordon Brotherston, and that the relationship between the Latin American art and the Latin American texts, I mean the Native American texts, and again this issue of what is Latin American, because Gordon was so fascinated with the indigenous scripts of Mexico, and that influenced an awful lot of the way we were thinking about things. I think that all the boundaries were irrelevant, really.
Well, I think it sort of really speaks to a time too when it's such a new field within Essex and within the UK that, I mean, you really, you could do anything, really. There was a tremendous amount of freedom within sort of devising the material and pursuing sort of, what boundaries to push, wasn't there?
Yes. Well, from a slightly selfish point of view, from my own own research type, there was a really difficult decision to make at a certain point between going on more with Dada and Surrealism, which is what I had started working on, and looking at more of the pre-Columbian things. And it was a time in the 70s when basically Mayan hieroglyphic writing had not been deciphered. And it was a terrible, I mean not terrible, it was a real temptation actually to become an epigrapher and work on that, because I was really fascinated by it. And of course subsequently it has almost entirely been interpreted. But Gordon Brotherston was a great inspiration. And we did a lot of exhibitions and conferences with the Museum of Mankind, which is those days with Burlington Gardens, and had the big Mayan collection. And we did. You did an exhibition with Gordon.
Yes.
The Other America.
the other America, which was meant to be in the Minories, and for some reason that fell through, and it was then in the Museum of Mankind. But of course, the other aspect of these exhibitions is that students took part in them all. I mean, the contribution to students to all this work was absolutely vital, just vital. We couldn't have done it without them.
No, that's right, the whole thing. And if you look back, we were looking back at some of that material. I mean,
this is just another pre-Columbian exhibition we had with material from the Ipswich Museum called Huacos, which was Peruvian pottery from the Ipswich Museum. And everything is done by students. I mean, it's completely written and curated by students.
That was the first exhibition in the University Gallery as well. As
That's
we know,
right.
it, the one on sort of,
I think that's right.
Yes,
Square
it was.
5.
That's right. I mean, and Wicklow itself, ESCALA, wouldn't have started really without the sort of push from the students.
No.
From Charles Cossack and Gabriel Perez-Barrera.
I think this is a sort of a natural moment too, to look at sort of, you've done art in Latin America, the show at the Hayward in 1989. Val, you've sort of published, sort of drawing the line with Oriana, sort of 89. In that lead up to, the moment of sort of the founding of the collection, and sort of, what sort of really inspired it? I mean, we've talked about the object-based learning and looking at artworks face to face, but I mean, how did it all, in your words, how did it all come together? And
there's a wonderful document upstairs, which I must say I've forgotten, which Zell and Sarah found, which was April 1993. That is several months before the collection was actually launched. Addressed to the Vice-Chancellor,
and the
Dean,
registrar.
saying, please could we start a collection of art from Latin America?
Because we've been offered a work.
We've been offered a work. We were offered the work, the Memoria by Ciron Franco, who appears every now and again on the screen behind us. Charles Cossack was a great fan of this artist, Brazilian artist, who lives in Goiânia, still lives in Goiânia, and he wanted to offer this painting. But it sort of was coming out of the blue. And so, there was a collection, university collection of art, but we were really thinking specifically about art from Latin America. So it didn't seem to belong there at all. So we wrote this request, to which apparently, I'm glad to say, in a sense, Sarah, there was no reply. So we then wrote again, and there was still no reply.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah. And then
I think you just did it.
I think we just,
we just did it.
We just did it. Yeah.
We just started. I mean, okay, we really want to do it, and we had tremendous support and work from Charles and from Gabrielle.
Yeah.
There's Gabrielle.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here. Yep.
And because the first work came from Brazil, the other situation is important to understand, given that almost all the first works that entered the collection were gifts, usually from the artists, sometimes from collectors, sometimes from museums. It looks as if we were being greedy, but actually the artists were so unknown in this country at the time. They were really very eager to give their work, because we'd be able to show it. We'd be able to sort of promote them properly.
Yeah.
So I think that was quite important. But anyway, the first artist was from Brazil. So who had better connections with Argentina, then got in touch with people in Buenos Aires, and we had a tremendous set of gifts from Marcos Curie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic range of material. But then I think I was probably director of the Latin American Centre at the time, and we were sending students to then the year abroad, and I would have to go out and visit them, but I always made the point of going around and soliciting donations from artists in different countries. So we after the sort of over-heavy Brazilian-Argentinian start, it immediately grew so rapidly. It really took off at such a speed.
I mean, we've, with the accession figures that we've sort of looked at, I think within the first 3 years, it was over 300 artworks.
Something like that.
That sort of, and that must, I mean, to be honest, that must have taken the university by surprise. that it was, I mean, it was an exponential success, really. That it was, and then what to sort of practically to do with the artworks in terms of storage and...
Can we just go back a wee bit to the? I think the launch was only a few weeks after the
December
December 93. December
wasn't it?
93.
And it was really impressive how the
photographs from it.
Foreign and Commonwealth Office, all sorts of
It was.
important, all the ambassadors and people really got on board at an incredible speed, and it was fantastically well supported. The launch was really a big do. It was really...
We've there were a couple of photos that sort of appeared, I think, from the launch.
You've got this stuff researched now, yeah.
This is from your editorial in the Wexland newsletter in '96. That's 3 years after it.
Right.
You wrote this, and you put, "We were fortunate in that from the start we enjoyed tremendous support from artists and collectors from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the British Council, Latin American embassies in London, and from the universities. And more recently, visiting arts have been very encouraging." And so there was a lot of support.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's still sort of, after sort of 30 years too, the support that we receive from artists it's still the same. Wanting to sort of to donate artworks. And I think sort of still after 30 years, there's still such a belief in your sort of founding aims and your vision and what you've done, that, students are still here. I mean, and the relationships that we've had with the artists, going back to, say, Ophelia Rodriguez, founding sort of, in '94 up until her death sort of last year, there's been a long-standing relationship between the collection and the people that we work with, that it's not just taking in an artwork, is it? No. It's sort of working with the students on, with the artwork, working with the artist, and just sort of going back to that as well. I mean, you had mentioned earlier about students and working with students, with the Huaco sort of, the catalogue. Students with ESCALA, not just through the founding donation by Charles Cossack, who was an MA student, but students have played such a fundamental role in sort of supporting ESCALA and sort of, help working in there. I mean...
And researching the work of artists who then, of course, were very happy to donate.
Aurora.
Yes.
Yeah. You mentioned that. You explained that. Aurora.
Aurora was...
Oh, Aurora, yes. That was a graduate journal on sort of art and research.
Art of the Americas. Art and architecture of the Americas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Entirely set up and run by the students.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what I really liked one of the panels in the exhibition in the University Gallery at the moment, which talks about our original aims of trying to make art from Latin America accessible in this country and to bring it here. But now it's moved into another. I'm looking at Lisa because I think you've been very instrumental in this, in looking at other issues like human rights and environment through the collection.
That's right.
Still the emphasis on the works, but it's now given it a huge importance, I think.
And I think there's always been, I mean, Lisa sort of very much continuing on, Dr. Lisa Blackmore from the sort of, from Phase, and sort of who we work quite closely with the collection, is there's been, I think, certainly, whether it's sort of an echo of from the School of Comparative Studies and the sort of the broad education sort of going back to Sloman, but I think the collection really has worked with different departments across the thing. I mean, there was projects with biological sciences, with human rights.
Yes.
So there's always a way of, partnering the arts with other kind of research things across the university. So it was never an insular collection in terms of how it works, so working with students, but also with working sort of across the disciplines on campus.
And the founding donation raises plenty of issues about poisoning the land.
That's right, yeah.
I mean, the Sidon Franco is just so powerful like that.
I mean, and it's amazing, really, sort of how it's sort of thing. I mean, what's thinking back? I mean, I sort of don't want to sort of, thinking back what going through the exhibition, going through sort of, the archive material upstairs. I mean, what do you think has been sort of a great legacy? I mean, one of the sort of the best legacies of the collection, or sort of the impact that the collection has had both here in Essex, in the UK, and really sort of internationally. I mean...
Well, I suppose we have tremendously, still I think quite flourishing contacts with many people in Latin America. With artists, with museums, with universities, and of course a lot of students, came from Latin America to study Latin American art here.
Yeah.
Which of course, which is understandable, because when you go there, we might think of it in rather general terms, but if you go to Mexico, Mexico does Mexican art. And Colombia does Colombian art, and so on. So it sort of, and in fact, one or two people who came to do their PhDs here and have gone back, and are sort of, reintroducing, if you like, or introducing the notion of a wider notion of art, the need to study art, not just of your own country, but more broadly.
And I think your point about definitions of Latin American art, I mean, one of the things, looking at the range of material that's on show, we had so many discussions about whether we should accept this or not, or what sort of category, how do we decide what we are going to include, and what constitutes art, or what constitutes a collection. And I think, I feel that's still there. I mean, I feel, the works themselves say that.
There was a rather famous incident. We had we had an acquisitions committee. You tell.
There was an acquisitions committee. I can't remember what the work was, but
it was terracotta bowls.
Oh, that's right.
Warmies.
Yeah.
Warmies bowls. Beautiful terracotta bowls. And was it Cuauhtemoc?
Yeah, Cuauhtemoc.
Was on the acquisitions committee, and he wasn't the least bit interested in this pottery stuff. And we were talking about it, and he was looking out the window, And then after about 10 minutes, he turned around and said, "We have to accept this work because you've talked about it for 10 minutes." And it was just wonderful. It was just, he felt that was for him, that was the confirmation that it was worth, if we had something to say about it, it was worth keeping.
Yes.
I think that still sort of really holds true, is that, there's so many sort of, we teach so often with the artworks, and we research them, and they really engage so many students in so many ways that, the discussions we have around them, and I mean, that's it, isn't it? It's sort of how works sort of continue to sort of spark these discussions. And I think it might be a natural sort of break to open it up to any questions that people have, and we're going to sort of have some ushers here as well that will sort of, we're all over, go around with the microphones. And may I ask as well that before you ask a question, if you could introduce yourselves, please. Or just sort of say your name. There we go. Right up there.
Matthew Bone, but you two know Latin, but it's some distance to see each other. And I just really wanted to ask, so when you began sort of teaching about kind of art from Latin America, and when you begin kind of sort of later on kind of building the collection, were there any kind of models in Europe that you could kind of look at, or say kind of North America? So was there kind of something like anything kind of happening in Spain or France or kind of Germany that's kind of also looking at art from Latin America that you could refer to? Or were you pretty much out on your own, so to speak, and actually kind of really inventing this from the ground up?
I've probably forgotten something, but the only thing I can immediately sort of talk about is the study of Latin American art in the United States, where it was established long before here. It was one of the, I think it was one of the sort of 5 subjects that, was it Kubler? I mean, George Kubler, who was the great art historian there, but it was somebody else who laid down, who said every art history department should have people teaching Chinese art, Latin American art, European art, you know. So it was established there.
Okay.
Not an enormous amount was published, but there was a very, very, I thought, wonderful exhibition by somebody called Stanton Catlin, which I happened to see in 1966 in Yale. And it was called, oh God, what was it called? I think it was just called Art from Latin America, the Modern Era, and it was very much the same sort of period that I was looking at, from the late 18th century to the early 20th century. So that's one aspect.
I don't think there was anything much in Europe. I mean, maybe just that it passed me by, but it didn't. There's nothing that at the time we had any contact with anybody.
No. I mean, there were Mexican art historians writing about murals and so on. There was that. I can't really think of.
No, certainly not. I can't think of any sort of modern, sort of looking at modern art. It was maybe more sort of pre-Columbian but perhaps from more of an ethnographic.
Ethnographic.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a very strong, I think, still a very strong sort of tradition of academic research into pre-Columbian things in France. Where was it? Bordeaux. I can't remember where it was, but there was that. But that's rather different.
Yeah.
That was.
Yeah.
Otherwise, no. It's a very good question.
Yes.
It's been, thank you so much for kind of sharing your memories and experiences. It's been a kind of real delight to kind of hear, particularly as kind of early days. TJ Clark gave a talk last year, remembering his time teaching art history in 68, 69, and the strangeness of it, which is going to really kind of fascinating kind of too. Yeah. And I should pass on. Thank you.
Yeah, he was teaching at the very beginning with Joseph Brickwood, who was the first head of department there. And I was just rereading Simon Collier's description of those early days. And every year, the first year course changed. But I just happened to be there this wonderful year, 68 to 69, when the chronology was reversed, and we started with the 20th century, went on to the 18th century, and the final term was Revolution. And it was a very exciting year of teaching. That didn't last very long.
Got a question. Oh, and then up there.
Thank you, Sanya Bahun, Executive Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities. And among the wonderful memories, recollections, and inspiring stories that you've shared, I'm struck by 2. One is about the comparative ethos of the school and the faculty were part of, and compared to what Sarah highlighted as the continued use of the collection across disciplines and across subject areas. And the other one is simply historical sense of the years study of Latin American art, or art from Latin America rather, has passed, and the ESCALA has passed, which are really charged politically in Latin American space in particular. So I wonder, my question is, how you navigated those spaces, so from the 60s onwards, but in particular as we were trying to acquire artworks, there were a lot of very complex political dynamics across Latin America. We also had students who came as refugees to Essex. So do you have any thoughts or stories how you navigated that space?
Well, I mean, I'm sure Val has memories too, but
I don't have
the
any
immediate one is Chile. I mean, we were, very, very much involved in that. And what was the name of the group?
Artists for Democracy.
Artists for Democracy. Yeah, Art for Democracy. And so Cecilia Vicuña, who was part of that, became, well, a friend and supported the collection quite a lot. So that was one area. And in fact, sorry, I don't want to go on. But
Carry on.
it was so we were in contact with Roberto Mata, who was a Chilean artist who was very, very active against the coup. And I had the idea, I wanted him to paint a mural here. And it would have been such a good idea, and I just failed to get it through.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. No, I can't think of any other.
Paraguay. I mean, all things you've collected in.
Yes. I mean, I think quite a lot of the work that we've collected has got, well, obviously ecological, but also political and economic overtones. I mean, so it's been very much a part of the sort of ethos behind it, I think. The content. I mean, that's going back to Sloman, that, you know, all these things overlap. Yeah. It's not just a work of art on its in isolation. It's
I
part
think,
of it.
and a lot of some of the works that we've acquired, I mean, have been through the research projects, sort of like the David Perez Davis, you know, which was sort of working with Sonia on sort of research projects, and so that it sort of tells that tale about sort of the research here at Essex, but then kind of keeps telling that tale, you know, to sort of subsequent years of students, and you know, these are the themes and the raised within the artworks, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, obviously it was, really, really bad times in Argentina and elsewhere, simultaneous with what we were doing. So one was very, very aware of the problems.
Jane Hindley, I'm a former Latin Americanist, and I teach in the Interdisciplinary Studies Centre. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the impact of Dawn, particularly of your Hayward show, because I think this was a really very groundbreaking exhibition, particularly because of this context of the 70s and 80s and the image of Latin America that we had in the UK of grim soldiers, revolutionaries, and very little about the everyday life and the sort of colour, because we had these kind of like, everyone was in olive and fighting for justice or repressing and so on. So I wondered, at that sort of cultural level, how did people respond to the exhibition? And also the idea that you were collecting art from Latin America, and how the exhibition challenged, you know, some of those ingrained images, really, of the region.
There were a lot of... is it still working? Can you hear me? Yes.
The collection predates, the exhibition predates the collection too.
The exhibition predates the collection, no, but there were a lot of problems with the exhibition in many ways. I mean, I was very clear what I wanted to do. It was very based on the things I've been teaching, and it was described by somebody as a rather didactic show by a Marxist academic, which was sort of not quite what I meant to happen. But it was not tremendously well received by the press. One critic famously said there was only one decent artist in the whole show, Juan Blanes, who painted gauchos, and it was difficult. And in some ways, I think it had more impact, if you like, in some way in Latin America, certainly in terms of people becoming interested in the subject and students coming to study with us and then going back. I mean, that was very, very successful. But just two other points quickly about, in terms of it as an exhibition. We wanted it to be in 1989, although the idea had been sparked by the 1992, the 400th anniversary of Columbus. But we thought, well, everybody is going to be wanting to do an exhibition about Latin America in 1992, so we'll get ours in first, in 89. And in France, they had the same thought. So they did Les Magiciens de la Terre, which was a very different approach, but a much in a sense, one that responded much better to the spirit of the time, in that it juxtaposed a very contemporary artist with a First Nations artist. That was also highly criticised, but bringing in more contemporary things. I had always had the intention of doing another exhibition of more contemporary art from Latin America. That just never happened. But I think Guy Brett's section in the Hayward exhibition, which was by far the most sort of minimal, abstract, very beautiful, Oitisika and Lydia Pape and Lydia Clark, is really the part of the exhibition that's been most remembered, I think.
My name is Lilia. I'm a student here, and this term I'm taking the Collecting Art from Latin America module. And my question is, so Dawn, you mentioned earlier the importance of seeing the real things and how this fact impacted the creation of the collection and the important role it played in the idea of creating the collection. And I was wondering, now the access to the resources is easier with, I'm thinking about the internet. And so, yeah, I was wondering, how do you think about the importance of seeing the real things and the importance of the collection now?
Well, I don't think looking at an image on the internet is the same at all. I think that there's the very basic issue of scale, that if you, well, we don't have Mexican murals, but I remember going to see the Mexican muralists and thinking, my goodness, they're so gigantic. But the same with little tiny works of art as well. I mean, you can't get that sense from looking at a screen, but also, I mean, texture and the internet can distort so much in terms of the colour of something, and I still feel I don't really want to imagine a world where people don't look at art in the flesh, as it were, in the real world.
Hi, my name is Matt Lodder. I'm a lecturer in art history here. As someone who's not a Latin Americanist and barely an art historian sometimes, I have to say I'm so enthused and indebted to both of you, not just for bringing the material and all the work you both have done, but also on the kind of methodologies that you've brought and the spirit and energy you've brought to the discipline as a whole of art history. It's so inspiring. And I was struck, Dawn, by what you said about there being, when you tried to research this stuff, there being no literature on this material. And funnily enough, the ESCALA collection is now a very useful teaching tool for first years because there's still not very much literature. And so they have to learn now in our first year classes how to approach material where there's not a huge amount of excellent secondary scholarship. And I wanted to ask you both, like, the project that you were working on was so, in many respects, ahead of its time, and still, in a way, ahead of its time. The whole discipline of art history is desperate to talk about decolonialization and to talk about non-Western art. And you guys were doing it before those categories or terms really existed in the way they do now. So I wondered what your colleagues thought about what you were doing back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and actually why art history as a discipline is still struggling to get on board with the work that you guys kind of felt, what came so naturally to you in some senses as an exciting, passionate research project led by the works, so long ago. The rest of the discipline is still trying to catch up.
Well, thanks. I just... Is this working? Mm-hmm. Yes. Go back to the founding of the School of Comparative Studies, and one of the purposes, I think, of that, and Alison will correct me, and Joan, if I'm wrong, was the idea that really certainly art history in this country, and study of literature particularly, was extremely parochial, local, and concerned with itself, and not with actually seeing itself from others' eyes. So one of the things I think we thought was very important, though we struggled a bit to get it through in the department, was actually, you know, to look at art from other places and the context, its history, and what it looked like, and so on. I think that's fair, isn't it?
Yes, I think so.
So in a way, I feel we were trying to carry on that very early spirit of the comparative studies in art history, and there were clashes with those who really saw art as sort of Titian. Yeah.
Yes, Renaissance. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, hi, Michael Timke. I teach art history here. So I also want to second these comments for developing this amazing collection that's so valuable for teaching and for research. My question is about the strategy, if you can expand on how you expanded the collection from that, beyond that initial moment. Like, to what extent were you trying to actively fill in certain gaps? Were you trying to, because was it more, largely organic, based on relationships? How did it enter into dialogue with teaching? I would imagine that you're like, oh, well, I really need to teach about this, but I don't have this. Can you say just a bit more about that process of expanding the collection?
I think it's a very open-ended issue of how did we. In some cases, it was completely arbitrary that some ambassador contacted us and said, I've just been in contact with this artist, and here we are. This is, and initially we were fairly open-armed and accepted an awful lot of stuff without really having a proper committee to judge stuff. I don't know when we set up a committee, but we realised we did have to have some sort of a committee and make judgments on it. And then I think the point that we've made, that students played such an important part in it. Students came from Latin America because we had a collection, because we had a reputation for being seriously interested and endlessly debating what we meant by the art from Latin America, and studied here, and then that studied with us, but studying in their own country, and therefore established very good relationships with artists where they were coming from. I think that was a very important contributing factor. Isn't that right?
Yes, I think it was. I think we were, curiously, it was quite difficult acquiring work from Mexico. Do you remember that?
I think that's true.
Yes, yes. It was the only place where artists were not falling over themselves to help us. That was strange. But going back to Jane's question, I've just remembered something else, which is that a very prominent critic and art historian in Brazil called Ades Amaral, who is the sister of the lovely painting there with Val and I standing beside by her brother Antonio Enrique Amaral, which is one of our stars. But she was very cross about the exhibition art in Latin America, because she said it should have been done by someone from Latin America, and that I had no right.
That one.
Yeah. That one, yes. So there was that. I mean, that wasn't very common, but there was that response, which is worth mentioning. Sorry, that's not answer to your question, Michael. But
I'm Lisa Blackham. I'm a lecturer in art history. I work very closely with the collection, as Sarah has already said. I first came to see the collection 20 years ago as an undergraduate, and it was something that I found really exciting at that point, and it's a real honour, I think, to be able to work with it today, so thank you for establishing it. I have a question, I guess, about the way in which there's been a real shift or a series of shifts in the curatorial discussions around what it means to collect art from Latin America, and you've already mentioned a couple in the naming of Latin American art versus art from Latin America. You also mentioned the way in which this really became a hub for a series of curators who've gone on to define the field. Cecilia Fajardo, Cuauhtémoc Medina, Gabriel, and I wondered how you've seen the evolution of that discussion of art from Latin America, or do you feel like that moment of kind of shedding off the surname as I think Gerardo Mosquera put it now years ago, of not kind of hemming in artistic production from the region to this regional identity. Do you still think that that's going on today, as you know, this generation of artists who study, of curators who studied here have gone back and have become kind of leading institutional figures everywhere from, you know, Mwac down to Malba and etc. So how do you see that discussion today? Have we kind of gone past that now?
No, you do this. I'm not quite sure I could hear it properly, actually, Lisa. Just remind me of your key question. It's to do with whether we've gone past the need to have any sort of defining term.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes,
And
yes.
the role perhaps of the curators who studied here, who've gone back to the region and work in museums there, and whether you feel like that has been carried forward into the discussions that are happening in terms of curatorial practice in Latin America.
I think a lot of the people who went back, or some of them anyway from here, actually went back with, you know, an interest in, let's say, artists here. I mean, certainly Cuauhtémoc put on an exhibition of Jeremy Della at MWAC. I think it opened up dialogues, and it opened up, you know, exchanges, rather than. That's what I always hope it would do. I suppose it's so difficult to know how to sort of compartmentalise it. I mean, you have to sort of have some sort of either a theme or a place to direct the collecting practice, I suppose.
We did have quite a discussion about Chicano, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
Where do you put the boundaries?
And you also had sort of discussions too about if it was an artist that was born in Italy but sort of you know, lived in Brazil, or you know, those sorts of things, that it was, you were very kind of, you weren't hemmed by any kind of geographical boundary, were you? Or
Not
sort
really,
of,
no.
yeah.
No,
Not really. I think the difficulty is you can't be an expert in everything, and you can't collect from all over the world, or it becomes completely sort of shambolic, really. You have to do the best you can, I suppose. Keep them sort of limits of some sort, even if you do change the definitions a bit and argue about the definitions. That's the most important thing, perhaps, is to discuss and talk about what the boundaries are.
I mean, this is taking in a slightly different direction, but one of the things that became very clear to me too late was that one could have very good connections with, let's say, Bogota, but it meant that you had none at all with Medellin. I mean, sort of, and people wouldn't necessarily hand you round. I mean, you know, so ideally you would do more of the research on your own. And there's always so much to discover. And there's so many wonderful things. But it was quite difficult sometimes, because there were, you know, pockets of people with particular interests.
Yep.
And it had to be negotiated.
So I was very lucky just to come into the apartment in 1994, I think it was.
Gosh, was it?
And one of the things during the 90s was the very vibrant student body, especially the MAs and the PhDs, some of whom I've seen up behind you. And it was very exciting because, as you say, there were works of art coming in all the time, and nobody knew where to put them, or I think they ended up in a big storeroom somewhere. Those students obviously went back, and as you've just said, Val, you know, that they were very important in developing the collection. What happens now? Do students still come over from Latin America? Have we still got a vibrant student body that are heavily involved with the collection, or is this something that, are you adding to the collection now, or is it something that has slowed down in a way, even though it's obviously an incredibly useful teaching resource?
I don't know. You want to know.
I think it's, I mean, collecting has slowed because we're taking a sort of a reduced approach to it. And the main way that we're collecting it, you talk about sort of working with students, is we work with Lisa to run a postgraduate module called Collecting Art from Latin America, in which students learn about the collection, they learn about how museums acquire artworks, they learn how sort of the practicalities of it, like if it's really big, it's quite difficult, to bring into the collection. And then they research a proposed acquisition. They find out how much. They find out sort of potential costs. There is a sort of a budget that they're sort of given, and then they present in front of an expert panel, which is Lisa, myself, Giselle Hiron, the assistant curator, Don and Val are sort of there as well, and sort of other colleagues from art history. And then we sort of take on board what they've said and then choose from their suggestion sort of an artwork to acquire. So there's, again, going back to sort of some of the founding principles, there is a real student input into the direction of the collection, and they have to research how the artwork works with teaching and research here at Essex, how it works with other artworks in the collection. So it's really got to fit into the real dynamic and the themes of the collection. And the students that we've worked with, sort of with Lisa over the last sort of 4 years, they've been incredible, and the works that they suggest are absolutely outstanding. We've got quite a few of them now up in the Silberad, because those are the works that people really engage with sort of quite a bit in teaching and learning, but also just for enjoyment. So yeah, we work with students sort of still quite heavily all the time.
Am I on? Are students still coming over from Latin? Are you still is it still attracting overseas?
It is, yeah.
It is.
But it's not a problem now with
Giselle has come over from Lima, for example, I think.
Yeah, Giselle sort of come over from Peru to do her sort of BA and MA, and then she was actually sort of quite some years ago, she worked with the collection, she was an intern, and then she left, went back to Peru, and then sort of just came back sort of just over a year ago. So there's a real kind of legacy thing that perhaps it might not have been sort of an expected sort of outcome of the collection, is that, as a place of training, of sort of work opportunities, sort of really getting students, again, with the hands-on sort of experience with artwork, with a collection. I think I don't know if there's any more questions, but I was going to suggest that we've got the reception upstairs. So if everyone would like to I'd like to well, first off, thank Don and Val for being here. It's been a real pleasure sort of hearing about sort of how the collection was founded, sort of certainly in the early years. But what I'd like to do is also invite them and everyone here up to the bar in the Lakeside Theatre, sort of just upstairs. We've got a sort of a drinks reception, so we can continue discussions up there over a glass of wine or a cup of tea, whatever you prefer. But thank you very much, and thank you all, everyone, for coming.